My best friend Sophie is overwhelmed in a 2.5-month relationship with Alice, who says, "You've got nothing to lose," ignoring Sophie's real fears. When Sophie expressed her concerns, Alice got defensive, causing Sophie to question, "Am I the bad guy? Are we overreacting?" Hello everyone! I am usually more of a lurker on this subreddit, also known as I Watch the Click in Oz's Vault on YouTube, so please bear with me for any mistakes I might make regarding the subreddit's customs. Additionally, this is not about my perpetually single self, but rather about my best friend's relationship, who also chose the title for this post. She does not have Reddit or is very familiar with it, so she asked me to post here for some outside perspective. This means everything here has been written with her input and is approved by her before posting. Now on to the issue. My 24 male best friend, let's call her Sophie, 26, has been in a relationship with Alice, 24, for about 2.5 months after knowing each other for roughly 8 months before that. Approaching the 3-month mark, which is around the time the initial phase wears off, as I have heard, feel free to correct me, the first problems in their relationship are starting to manifest. Another piece of information that will certainly impact the situation, which I would like to mention from the start, is that Sophie is diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, ASD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, depression, childhood post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and anxiety, or as she puts it, this girl has mental issues, while Alice has been diagnosed with dependent personality disorder. For some background, Sophie is currently considering applying for a scholarship to further her education in her field and advance her career. However, she is quite anxious about several factors. First, it requires a significant amount of effort to actually apply for the scholarship. Second, obtaining the scholarship does not automatically guarantee acceptance into the university she wishes to attend. And third, she fears that she might not be able to complete it and would have to drop out due to the subject-specific and primarily mental challenges it would involve, which would consequently result in losing the scholarship and the need to repay all the funds. Therefore, to summarize, she is afraid of not being accepted, and if accepted, not being able to complete it. Particularly with the possibility of losing the scholarship and having to drop out, she would jeopardize her current, quite well-paying job for nothing. She discussed some of her concerns with Alice, and Alice's reaction triggered the realization that certain things were bothering Sophie. That's when she came to me for my opinion to see if she was overreacting. I am also diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder but possess higher objective analytical skills than she does. When she informed Alice about thinking of applying and shared her concerns, Alice's response was simply, "Try it. You have nothing to lose," which in itself is not necessarily a bad thing when considering just the scholarship application. However, since she actually has something to lose if she starts attending university and fails, Sophie understandably found this reaction unhelpful and felt that her fears were being dismissed rather than taken seriously. After our discussion, Sophie articulated what had been bothering her and realized that Alice often expresses sentiments such as "everything is going to be fine," even in situations where, from an objective perspective, which both Sophie and I generally adopt due to our autism, this is, in fact, not accurate. This "just go with it and everything will work out" mentality can, in our opinion, become quite detrimental when the chances are unfavorable from the outset, and we perceive it as bordering on toxic positivity. At this point, this really isn't a major issue, and you might suggest that she talk to Alice about it and communicate how her reaction made her feel. The problem is she already did so before consulting me, and this is where the situation somewhat escalated. When Sophie initially remarked, "But I don't think everything is going to be fine as you say," Alice simply responded, "Well, I believe it will be fine." When Sophie later addressed her concern regarding Alice's reaction and expressed understanding that Alice wanted to help and comfort her, she stated that this approach was simply ineffective, that she felt belittled, and that she needed a different kind of support. Alice became defensive, claiming she only meant well and that Sophie was making her feel bad by expressing this, effectively shifting the focus onto herself. In my opinion, she deviated from the topic at hand. Sophie's attempts to resolve the issue and clarify matters for future situations guilt-tripped Sophie, and placed herself in the role of the victim, while casting Sophie as the antagonist, when in this case it is actually the reverse. I do not know, but this deflection of blame instead of engaging in conversation and working on oneself to elevate one's partner's feelings seems like a red flag to me. Sophie agreed that it does indeed tread into red flag territory. If I learned that I had caused harm to my partner, I would strive to find a way to prevent that in the future. This is not the first instance of such behavior, although previously it was less noticeable because it was on a smaller scale. We perceive the risk of this escalating into a significant issue if the relationship continues, wherein every time Sophie raises any matter, she is positioned as the bad guy. Sophie asserts that Alice's inability to handle any form of critique is not limited to her alone, as Alice struggles to accept any feedback or suggestions for improvement from her professor at university. She tends to take any form of criticism personally and feels as though she is being attacked. A few days after this conversation, Alice suggested that they both apologize to one another for their hurt feelings, embrace at their next date, and then move on, which both Sophie and I find problematic, as we do not see why she should apologize when she did nothing wrong. Alice claims that Sophie hurt her feelings with her negativity, which we both view as a realistic and objective approach regarding the scholarship and university situation, by stating that what she said did not assist her. According to Alice, hearing this made her so upset that she could not even sleep properly. Sophie and I believe that telling her this was purely meant to make her feel guilty. The suggestion to apologize, hug, and move on is reasonable and should certainly be implemented in a situation where both parties have something to apologize for. Yet this is not the case here, once again, in our opinion. While discussing these issues, Sophie mentioned several additional matters that she perceives as problematic. For instance, Alice forgot that Sophie attended the university to participate in a free lecture to see how it is, even though Sophie had been talking about nothing else recently. Of course, one could forget the specific date but remember that she is engaged in it. However, when Sophie sent a photo of the lecture hall, Alice's response was not an "oh, is that today already?" or something similar, but rather a "what is that?" It was as though she had not forgotten the date, but entirely overlooked that Sophie was even attending. Another point is that Alice tends to engage in love bombing when she feels guilty about something she has done or said instead of addressing the issue at hand. Sophie once requested that she refrain from smoking near her or in the hallway of her apartment building, which I have just learned is actually illegal, so perhaps she can mention this next time, and Alice was offended and later kept apologizing and saying, "I love you," instead of accepting and respecting Sophie's request and altering her behavior. Alice once grew sad and angry when she said something that included, "Once we marry," and Sophie replied that, "We do not even know if we will ever get married," which I think is perfectly reasonable to say. Discussing marriage or getting upset when someone does not consider marriage 2.5 months into dating is somewhat irrational in my opinion. Sophie is starting to feel uncertain about this relationship and is becoming somewhat overwhelmed by the situation. She is unsure whether she should break up or not. Whenever she mentions even the possibility of breaking up, Alice becomes extremely sad and somewhat guilt-trips her, leading Sophie to abandon the conversation. We feel that Alice's diagnosed personality disorder complicates the ability to judge the situation entirely, and this is why Sophie decided to turn to Reddit, hoping to gain some fresh insights and/or different perspectives. Generally, we believe that a disability or disorder can certainly explain certain behaviors, but cannot excuse them. It is just challenging to distinguish which aspects fall into this category since we cannot determine what is a trait of her dependent personality disorder and what is simply a character flaw not related to her condition and thus cannot be justified by it. Alice is currently in therapy for her disorder, which is a positive indication that she is not in denial about it and recognizes that she needs professional assistance to manage it. Since this post has become quite lengthy, here is a list of things she hopes to obtain from this post. 1. What is your opinion? Do we recognize it as the problem it truly is, or are we exaggerating concerns? 2. Are we correct in interpreting her tendency to shift the blame as a means of avoiding accountability and changing her behavior? 3. Are there any different perspectives, thoughts, or ideas we may have overlooked or misunderstood? 4. What advice regarding the relationship can you offer? Should she attempt to find a way to salvage this relationship, and if so, how should she go about it? Or would it be better for her to break up considering the multitude of issues and potential red flags emerging after 2.5 months, which may not be worth pursuing? P.S. Since I am aware of what Reddit can be like, I also inform Sophie when I believe she is mistaken about something, and when we encounter issues with one another, we discuss them and find effective solutions. So, for any of you considering our friendship as problematic or questioning the way I presented things, it is not. I did not instill any of these beliefs into her mind. This is simply a collection of our chaotic texts, thoughts, and opinions organized into coherence for this post over the 4 hours it took to compile. Some of the points expressing we think were raised by her, and I agreed with them, while others were suggested by me, and she concurred but struggled to articulate these thoughts and feelings prior to this. TLDR, my best friend, who does not have Reddit or know how to use it, asked me to post this to gain different perspectives and ideas on how she should proceed with her new relationship since some serious issues, which may potentially be red flags, have arisen. Story 2. Invested everything in a Tinder romance. I thought I found my match. She called me a provider but ghosted after I didn't pay for dinner. Now she flaunts the Prada sunglasses I bought her online, teasing me while I'm left asking, was I just a means to an end? Should I block her or reach out for closure? I 31 years old male met this girl 32 years old female on Tinder in mid-December, and from the moment we began talking, everything felt very effortless. We connected almost immediately, bonding over shared interests such as food and travel. We were both seeking something genuine and were weary of the games people tend to play on dating applications. We had great chemistry, and I genuinely started to fall for her quite quickly. She seemed unique, and she made me feel like a man for the first time in quite a while. She is from Lithuania and lives here in the United States with her best friend's boyfriend, and their child, who is her goddaughter. I truly admired her, and she shared her past with me, including some rather heavy experiences such as trauma from her childhood. She opened up about her abusive stepfather, and it was evident that she carried a lot of emotional baggage. However, despite that, I felt a strong connection and genuinely began to care for her. She explained that in her culture, men are expected to be providers. She is not accustomed to the American 50-50 mentality, so from the beginning I committed fully paying for everything, buying gifts, covering dates, and so on. I did not mind at first because she made it seem as though she appreciated my efforts. However, over time, I began to feel as if it was becoming one-sided. One particular incident stands out to me. Early on, I drove her and her entire family around all day for their food business. I drove them to make deliveries, paid for parking twice, which was quite expensive, and also took them out for dinner. During the dinner, I did not contribute to the bill, and that is when things began to feel strange. The following day, she started ignoring me and left me on read. On Instagram, she posted a mirror selfie in a revealing outfit, which made me uncomfortable. Later, she sent me a lengthy message outlining everything I did wrong, how I embarrassed her in front of her friends and family, how I was rude to her, and how I did not pay for dinner even though I had literally helped all day long. I apologized sincerely, and after that, everything seemed fine. But something felt amiss, and I could not shake the feeling that I was possibly being taken for granted. As we continued dating, I started noticing additional red flags, but I kept ignoring them. She mentioned that men were constantly sliding into her direct messages, and she maintained close relationships with all her exes. In fact, one ex contacted her after she posted about me on her Instagram, telling her that he missed the intimacy they once shared and inquired about various details, my age, race, etc., that really caught me off guard. This guy even told her he was considering moving to the same town as her and asked her to help him secure a job through her friend's boyfriend. I expressed that this made me uncomfortable, but she dismissed my concerns. She suggested that if I had an issue with her being friends with her exes, perhaps we should not be together. I know this sounds irrational, but I stayed, convincing myself that I was merely being insecure. She stated it was one of the aspects she loved about me, that I was not insecure or controlling. In retrospect, I see how misguided I was to remain in that situation. Things became even stranger when she mentioned that she was contemplating paying a friend in the Lithuanian community who is a United States citizen to help her obtain citizenship. I was genuinely upset when she shared this with me. I felt betrayed and shocked. She immediately attempted to seduce me to soothe my feelings, and we ended up being intimate multiple times that night. However, even though the intimacy was enjoyable, I could not shake the feeling that I was simply being used to get her what she desired. A couple of weeks later, her best friend suggested that perhaps I should marry her instead of her marrying a stranger to acquire citizenship. She expressed how much she liked me, and I began to realize that they might have been using me all along. I kept telling myself that I might just be overthinking things and that she did care about me, but I was no longer certain. The final major issue arose after her birthday. I bought her expensive gifts such as Prada sunglasses and paid for everything related to her birthday celebration. We went out for dinner, and I also covered the meals of everyone present. Afterwards, I drove them around the entire day because they were hungover from the previous night. However, the next day she started acting cold and distant. I assumed it was because I had not paid for dinner, but when I inquired with her best friend about it, I was told that she had actually paid for the dinner herself, and the cash I saw her best friend's boyfriend give her was merely to cover their portion. Not wanting another argument, I preemptively apologized to her. Her response was, "I'm tired, I do not want to have this conversation right now. I told you before, actions, not words, good night." I was a bit taken aback, but I chose to leave it alone for the week. Then she posted a story on Instagram of her and her best friend having a movie night. The following day, she shared a video of herself at the beach, wearing the Prada sunglasses I had given her. However, here is the thing, she kept tilting her head in the video, ensuring that the sunglasses were visible with the logo facing the camera. It felt as though she was trying to flaunt the gifts I bought her and not subtly. It honestly seemed like she was doing it intentionally to provoke a reaction from me. I had posted a story of myself having fun with my friends on a fishing trip, and now here she was, boasting about how wonderful her time was. It felt as though she was trying to outdo me, even though she was the one who indicated she could not speak until Sunday. She is still ignoring me now. She continues to say she will talk to me when she has time, yet she has been posting more stories on Instagram showcasing the gifts I bought her. I feel completely confused and used. I am questioning if I should just block her and move on, but a part of me wants to reach out to understand why she is behaving this way. I know this situation is likely over, but I feel foolish for investing so much into this relationship when she clearly does not feel the same way about me. Summary: I met a girl on Tinder with whom I quickly formed a close bond. I paid for everything and tried to meet her cultural expectations of a provider, but things began to feel one-sided. She ghosted me after misunderstandings and began showcasing the gifts I bought her on social media, including prominently displaying the Prada sunglasses I gave her. She continues to ignore me while sharing moments of enjoyment without me, and I feel used and confused. Should I block her, or should I attempt to reach out to comprehend what is occurring?